Well, it's that time of the year. While 2021 was overall a great year for movies, it was not a perfect year for movies. While there are some great films this year that I ranked them, my top 15 best of the year right here, there are still some very bad movies in 2021. The ones that actually made us question why we love movies. So today, I'm giving you my top 10 worst movies of 2021. Now, before I properly get started with my list today, I want to know yours, and remember that these lists are subjective, they're for fun, and we're gonna disagree. That's the most fascinating part, to start engaging with one another. So let me know your top 10, 15, 20, anything you want, the worst movies for you of the year. And if you like movies and TV, this is the place to be, so consider clicking that subscribe button. If you want to see more lists like this, I just ranked my top 15 best movies of the year. I ranked the 2021 comic book movies, the 2021 animated films. You have a ton of those lists, including reviews for every one of those films. So, without any further ado, let's just start with quite a few dishonorable mentions. These are movies that I really didn't like. I thought they were bad movies, but they were not bad enough to make it to the bottom 10 of the year. Some of those include Halloween Kills, The Unholy, Kissing Booth 3, Music, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, the now available on Netflix The Lost Daughter, Benediction, which I watched at the London Film Festival as well, The Card Counter, M. Night Shyamalan's Old, Spiral from the Book of Saw, The Little Things, and last but not least, Earwig and the Witch, a film I never expected to be even considered for this because it's a Ghibli film, nevertheless, really bad. Without any further ado, now let's start with a proper list, the proper worst movies of the year. The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard kicks us off into the top 10, a film that, unlike its predecessor, takes away all the charisma, charm, and wit that naturally comes from their stars. It's got no new clever ideas, it's just doing the exact same thing the previous one did. But the previous one already did that. And while the first one poked fun at the classic The Bodyguard with Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston, this one clearly wanted to do that, but they never got to an agreement with Kevin Costner, as they present the guy who is Ryan Reynolds' father, and it's Morgan Freeman. And the jokes just don't land. Furthermore, it's a film that doesn't even shoot action properly. It's just cut, cut, cut. You cannot see a thing. I didn't laugh once. The action didn't make me feel anything. Apart from a few brief exchanges between Samuel L. Jackson, Salma Hayek, and Ryan Reynolds, this film had nothing good, new, or clever to offer, and one of the biggest disappointments of the year. Tom and Jerry comes up next, a film that when it focuses on Tom and Jerry and the slapstick that comes from one another, it's funny enough, it made me chuckle here and there, but it features the same problem that a ton of other WB properties feature at the moment, where its title characters are not its main characters. Tom and Jerry in this are just in the background of this completely boring and uninteresting story featuring very talented people in Chloe Grace Moretz trying to find a job at the hotel ran by Michael Pena and Robert Delaney, and then Colin Jost is trying to get married. Why is this happening in a Tom and Jerry film? It makes no sense. I don't even know why I'm saying these things, because it's supposed to be a Tom and Jerry film. It's simple. It's just these two trying to kill each other. That's funny. That has always been funny. It's hilarious. Why are they in this situation? There's one moment that is funny, and that's a moment where Jerry is trying to make it across the hall, and there's this incredibly elaborated trap by Tom that is done with real world things, with real world apparatus. But that's really it. It's a film that just doesn't feel like Tom and Jerry. It has all the problems of the early 2010s Smurfs and the rest of the films that try to adapt cartoons into live action so unnecessarily. Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins is our number 8, a film that while on the surface it casts the correct people for a film like this to kickstart an action franchise, it then does everything wrong when it comes to kickstart an action franchise. Henry Golding is a super charming actor that has a ton of charisma, and he seems to be a really nice guy, but the film writes this character to such an unlikable degree where he constantly makes the wrong choices without any point of progression. He never struggles to make the wrong choice. He always just makes. That's his status quo. That's his modus operandi. Where then it frames the supposed villain of the story, played by the amazing Andrew Koji, who is playing Storm Shadow, in this incredibly likable light where he is constantly screwed throughout this entire film. You can't blame him by turning evil by the end, where it feels so forced, much like the rest of the G.I. Joe references in this film. They were just there by corporate mandate. They do not belong in this film. They do not gel well into this film. They do not feel organic. This entire film is just framed in the entirely wrong way. Not to mention how the action is shot. It's chopped to pieces. You have Andrew Koji, who does incredible stuff in Warrior. You have Iko Uwais, most famously known from the Raid movies. These people can do martial arts on screen very well. Peter Mensah from Spartacus, and a ton of other incredibly talented action actors. And the film just does not let them have their due. If anything, Snake Eyes works very well as a Storm Shadow film, but that's clearly not what the film was intending on doing, and it completely falls flat at starting a cinematic universe and giving us a hero that is likable and easy to root for. Number 7 is Infinite. While Snake Eyes had some interesting ideas but then completely muddled it all in the execution, Infinite is a collection of tropes and premises and cliches and ideas from other films such as The Highlander, The Matrix, even a little bit of The Old Guard, and mixes them all together but does nothing with them. This movie is entirely just a premise, and then it's a bunch of ill-formative ideas that do not go anywhere and feel incredibly derivative. Mark Wahlberg, who I really like as an actor, is just playing Mark Wahlberg as he was in the Transformers movies. The only commendable thing about this film is that Chiwetel Ejiofor is so freaking committed to the craft. You would almost believe this is an awards nominated film by the way he is giving it his all to the craft. The plot doesn't make sense. The mythology is so badly conveyed and full of holes. It's hard to buy into this world and into the conflicts of these characters. This is one that, despite being shot by Antoine Fuqua, just does not know when to stop chopping up the action in its film. And once again, this one doesn't even have good ideas because the ideas are not fully formatted. It seems like they just threw stuff at the wall to see what sticks, and nothing really stuck, unfortunately. Don't Breathe 2 is a misguided attempt at redemption. Or rather, that's what they wanted to do, but they clearly don't do a redemption story. This is an incredibly unlikable character where he worked in the previous film because he was portrayed as the monster. He is actively the person we are rooting against, and this film asks us to root for him. While it's him and a bunch of even equally horrible people trying to get their hands on this little girl, and you just know no matter where she goes, it's bad for her. It's awful for her. And the film just seems to have no idea that this man is completely detestable and unlikable. Despite the film wanting to frame him as a hero, or even at best a reluctant hero. He doesn't work as a protagonist because they clearly have to nerf him compared to who he was and what he did in the first film, just so we can kind of buy him as the underdog. But we don't buy him as the underdog, as we know what this man is capable of. From the beginning, it just feels and comes across like a recipe for disaster. I adore that First Don't Breed because I'm rooting against this man. I want to run away from him. I do not want to see him save a little girl because I know what he does from the first movie to little girls. Dear Evan Hansen comes in at number 5, and this one is as high as it is on the list because I feel it's an actively harmful film, because it does not teach a lesson to this honestly emotional terrorist and the way he exploits this grieving family. This film seems to frame mental health, in this case depression and anxiety, two things I suffer from, as excuses for the most inhuman and inexcusable behavior. This character is an emotional terrorist. That's what he is. And then it seems to do that with every other character, as people throughout this film make the most horrible choices just to spite others. I went into this film actually hopeful that it was going to frame this story as someone who is doing the wrong thing and clearly needs medical help, but it doesn't do that. It frames him as a hero who is doing bad things, but because he has good intentions, he is easily forgiven by the end. And I think that's very harmful to portray in such a beloved story that clearly for some reason worked on Broadway and on stage, but in the film is just framed in a way that rubbed me very wrong. This film actually has fundamental story problems in its writing that are hurtful, that are harmful, and that are dangerous to portray on film. This is a man that pretends to be friends with someone who took their own life just to get on with their little sister. I lost hope in this film at around 20 minutes when there was a musical number that was very cheerful and we saw him tap dancing with a kid that had just committed suicide, that he was pretending to be friends with by creating fake emails to show his family. Furthermore, Amy Adams in this film is such a freaking imposing presence. She's imposing her way of grieving onto everyone around them and just makes her, and by proxy everyone else in this film, absolutely detestable. Number 4 is Demonic, which you didn't see because it didn't come out in many places, and you probably should keep it that way. This is not a good movie. This takes an interesting idea of someone who is possessed and their daughter steps into their brain through this machine. It uses technology and mixes it with the classic possession film, but it literally does nothing with that premise. Nothing happens in this film. Nothing interesting happens. Nothing that makes sense happens. This is honestly a film that is very hard to relate what happened because it's so utterly forgettable. The characters are not particularly well defined. There's a mother and a daughter, and that's basically how far the characterization goes. The story just takes these weird directions that are honestly laughable and make no sense even within the mythology that Neil Blomkamp sets up in this film. Yeah, he directed it. Remember him? I like all his 3 previous films. Yes, even Chappie. So when I tell you Demonic is one of the worst of the year that you should not waste your time with, it's because really nothing happens in it. So everything you know at the start of the film is everything you know by the end. It's that utterly forgettable, committing the capital sin in any movie. Never be boring. And Demonic is very boring. Number 3, Cinderella, a cringeworthy modern-day retelling of the classic, except it seems to believe that Cinderella is a naturally misogynistic story. What can I tell you about this film that 1,000 other people have not said already? Camila Cabello is a good singer, I guess, even though it's not shown in this film, and she can be a singer all she wants, but an actress, she is not. And judging by this one movie, neither is Pierce Brosnan, Minnie Driver, or even Idina Menzel. Nobody can make this script work. It's got a ton of cringe-worthy lines that are just supposed to be girl power instead of actually having a story that re-emphasizes girl power and practices what it preaches. The biggest joke, at least in intention, in this film is when James Corden is being turned back into a mouse, but his human head remains in this tiny mouse body. That gave me nightmares. It did not make me laugh. The film just makes these weird decisions where he wants to improve on the original Cinderella, but while it starts from this one place where Cinderella is supposed to be someone who is suffering and being mistreated by a stepmother, she's the happiest person in the film right from the go, and then it tries to make the stepmother not really that evil, so the conflict of Cinderella is completely gone and is something else entirely. This is a film that could have been anything, but it clearly does not understand what made the source material so immortal and so long enduring. Thunder Force is our runner-up. This is a film that I couldn't even enjoy when I was not sober. This is a film that I watched and just couldn't bring myself to review because I wanted to think about it and talk about it as little as possible. Melissa McCarthy is a super talented and funny actress. Octavia Spencer is an Academy Award level actress, and they are both so bored in this. They bring no energy. To no surprise, this is directed by Ben Falcone, who is Melissa McCarthy's husband. And every time Melissa McCarthy does something with her husband, it seems to just not work. Furthermore, another common thread in their movies together is that Ben Falcone just loves casting his wife as these super unlikable, obnoxious characters that are so loud and so irritating for no reason whatsoever. This entire film just seems like Super Tammy. This is a film that has been released in the golden era of superhero films. It should have been a place to critique and poke good fun at the tropes and cliches and everything that comes with the genre, but it's so lazy to try anything new and risky and actually funny. But our number one is Hes All That, a remake of a high school rom-com from the late 90s that, honestly, its message has endured so well despite some of its problematic cliches. This is a film that talks about how we should not care about followers and the friends that we make on the internet and whatnot, and they started by casting someone who is not an actress, someone who is a TikTok star that got famous for dancing. This is one of those films that are very rare, because no matter how many bad films I watched throughout these years, no matter how many bad films I watched this year, there wasn't a single film where I gave up all hope on the first scene until this one. All I'm going to say is that Addison Rae, who I didn't even know before this film, I heard the name Addison Rae, but I had no clue who she was. She's clearly not an actress. I'll say that, the poor thing. Any and everything beyond that is just painful to watch. The characterization for these characters is just all over the place. Peyton Meyer and Tanner Buchanan and Madison Patisse, who I think are very talented young stars, nobody was invested in this. The direction is non-existent. It just seems like these characters say things and nothing has like consequences on top of one another. This doesn't feel like a film. This feels like a collection of scenes that are intending on making you laugh, but it's just painful. It's a film that is entirely hard to watch. Hes All That is a superficial and vapid experience that left me completely numb. This film is completely nonsensical, and it pains me to have watched it. It pains me to have kept my eyes open for it. He's All That makes it to number 1 ultimately because above any of the other films on this list is the one that I felt I didn't take absolutely anything away from, but it definitely took something from me. My precious time. That is only one life, and I regretted giving my time to this film the most. And those are my picks for the top 10 worst movies of the year. There's some honorable mentions at the beginning of the video, which were movies I didn't like, but they just weren't the absolute worst, unlike these. But let me know your thoughts on my list. Share your list. Again, do a top 15, top 20, 10, 5, whatever. What are the worst movies that you watched this year? Anything and everything down there in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to watch the rest of the lists that I've been uploading the past few days. And if you enjoyed what you saw here and you love movies and TV, this is the place to be. So I hope to see you in all the future conversations about movies and TV that we have coming up. Thank you so much for watching. Happy New Year, and I'll see you tomorrow for my most anticipated movies list. So until then, love each other and love the movies.